First of all, what it means is that they walk randomly. Okay? So that because they're so tight that they're just kind of making their way. They can't sit here and pick their little spots to walk in. Okay? So what that means is that what doesn't get eaten just gets hoof shredded into the soil surface where the microorganisms can contact it in little bits and pieces to incorporate it in the soil. Second thing that mobbing does is it makes them very unselective in their grazing. They eat everything because they've got this whole herd pushing behind them, and so they're eating aggressively as fast as they can and not being selective. See, they have a palatability index like you and me. They like their ice cream better than liver and onions, just like you and I do. I mean, if you like liver and onions better than ice cream, you got other problems. But anyway, I mean, they have a palatability index just like all of us, right? And so by having to eat aggressively with all this pressure coming behind them, it forces them to be equal opportunity grazers, which means they eat weeds, forbs, herbs, briars, thistles, grass, clover, fairly equally. Actually, that helps them be healthier because they're getting a diversity on their plate into their rumen, more than they would if they just selectively ate. And they actually fill up faster. And an herbivore does not make meat or milk unless they're ruminating. So you want to minimize grazing time and maximize rumination time, cud chewing time. And so the faster they tank up and fill through this aggressive grazing, they actually perform better because they eat faster, tank up faster, lie down quicker. Right? And the third thing is remember the first one was they're moving, second one they're mobbing, and the third one is they're mowing. They're not eating chicken manure, feathers, dead cows, right? When the U.S. started 40 years ago conducting seminars at steakhouses and treating farmers like us to free dinners to teach us this new scientific basis of feeding dead cows to cows. We did not sign on to it because we hated the U.S. or because we were anti-science or anti-progressive or Luddites or whatever. We didn't sign on to it because we looked in nature for a model, a pattern, a template where herbivores eat carrion. You can't find it. Well, of course, the scientists at the USDA said this is the way we should do it. And 30 years later, there was this big collective worldwide, oops, maybe we shouldn't ought to done that, with bovine spongiform encephalopathy, also known as mad cow. I think it's pretty disingenuous that the organization that promoted and gave us mad cow is trying to position itself as the arbiter of food safety. And it does give you pause when you realize that 85% of all Americans believe that the government is responsible for the safety of their food. We're talking about the same people that gave us DDT, irradiation, cloning, mad cow, genetically modified organisms,
multiflora rose,
patented autumn seeds. Olive, yeah, okay. Yeah, you got it. Okay. So here's the deal, and I belabor this point on this because the herbivore in the radical environmentalist agenda in our country is being demonized and marginalized as this promoter of climate change. And I repent right now in sackcloth and ashes for all of the devastation that herbivores have done, especially domestic livestock, over the years. But it's not their fault. They've been managed by people who have not been looking at the natural template of soil building with this moving, mobbing, and mowing. And so what we do is we move those cows every day at about 4 o'clock to a new paddock. So where we're standing has only had cows on it 3 times this year, 1 day apiece. And it will probably have them on maybe 3 more times the rest of the year. So any 1 square foot of ground will have only had an herbivore on it 6 days in the year. Why? To take this plant that is reaching slower metabolism where the solar collector is shutting down and prune it back to restart mode. The herbivore is nature's biomass accumulation restart button. And if they are properly managed, they are the most efficacious model of stimulating carbon sequestration and solar conversion into decomposable biomass. And that's why we say we're in the mob stocking, herbivorous solar conversion, lignified carbon sequestration, fertilization business. And if every farm in America would practice this biomimicry model, we would sequester all the carbon in fewer than 10 years that's been emitted since the beginning of the industrial age. All we've got to do is take the organic matter in our soils up 1%, and it would all happen. In fact, it has actually declined since the Europeans came here. It's declined about 5%. So all we got to do is bring back 1, and we're up and running. Okay, yes?
You mentioned when we first got here that you had 500 acres, and I didn't know your cows. I was just wondering if you have an exact, not an exact ratio, but considering they're only in this pasture like 6 times, is there a ratio of acreage to cow for that model to work?
Well, I'm not sure I understand the question, but I'll say this. It is totally scalable. Now, we measure it in cow days per acre. In other words, that's how many days, how many cow days of food can this acre produce? That's like bushels of wheat per acre. It's like inches to a carpenter, okay? Our Augusta County average of cow days per acre, if you bought 100 acres of pasture, went down to the extension office and said, I just bought 100 acres of pasture, how many cows can I put on it? They'll sit down on their laptop and they'll put it in. And for our degree days, our temperature, our climate, our elevation, blah, 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 and it'll spit out 80 cow days per acre. All right, that's the standard in our county, 80 cow days per acre. Here, for the last 10 years, we have been averaging well over, you ready for this? 400 cow days per acre. And we own no plow, no disc, have not bought a bag of fertilizer in 50 years, and have not planted a seed in 50 years. Okay? Nothing, trust me on this, nothing competes with really getting in tune and in sync with biomimicry. Nothing. You know, if somebody at Monsanto creates something that increases productivity by 1%, they'll make the front page of the New York Times, right? I'm sitting here showing you a 500% increase, and we're lunatics.
I guess then my next question would be, what would be the smallest scale that you could see that working on if someone wanted, like we're getting 3 chickens, our start next Tuesday, but I'm saying like if you wanted to start with like 1 cow.
You know, 1 cow, you probably wouldn't want to do it less than about 1.5 acres to start. But what you do, now I would always have 2 cows because, you know, 1 cow, yeah, they like, I mean, you can be a really good friend, but you don't want to be so good a friend, okay?
Still walk on 2 legs.
Yeah, you need to, you know, be able to, all right? You need to be able to ruminate together, okay? So you know, for a cow, in our area here, I wouldn't think about 2 cows if I didn't have, you know, at least a couple 3 acres, all right? But if I did have a couple of 3 acres, all right, which actually puts you into the realm of a lot of suburban lots, right? So what you do there is where we're confining maybe 200 head on an acre a day, you would confine these two on a 40th of an acre a day, which an acre is 5,000 square yards. So 40th of an acre would be 125 square yards, which would be like 10 yards by 12 yards. Can you envision that? 10 yards by 12 yards. Are you with me? See, the beauty of this is that the large cost is not in the infrastructure. The value here, the equity in this, is not in the infrastructure. It's in the management. I mean, that little fence right over there, that's the fence. I mean, that's as good as a concrete wall for, a trained herd of cows. So the infrastructure is cheap. What's valuable is management. And the beauty is you don't have to borrow management from a bank.
No.
And that completely changes the way in for young people. So many agricultural prototypes in the U.S., the industrial prototype for sure, requires a huge investment to get in. If you want to grow one chicken for Tyson's, the first thing you have to do is build a $500,000 house. Okay? And the beauty of this is that you can get in on a small scale because the infrastructure is not what drives the engine. It's management that drives the engine. But farmers love to buy things and not management's the hardest thing because it sounds too much like discipline. See? And we'd all rather buy a gadget or something in a bag or a piece of machinery than manage. Yes?
About how many chickens would you need to follow those two cows to do what you're doing?
2 chickens behind 2 cows would be plenty.
Okay.
Yeah, yes.
Yeah, I was going to ask a similar question. How do you, can you put chickens and cows together?
Absolutely. Now, generally a piece of chicken infrastructure will be too light for a cow to rub on. So you need to separate them with a fence, so the cows don't rub on the light chicken infrastructure. That's something you got to be aware of. But absolutely, the symbiosis between birds and herbivores is huge. In fact, herbivore manure carries the 7 essential digestive enzymes for proper bird digestion. So there's a very symbiotic relationship between the herbivore and the bird. And why you always see in the nature programs flocks of birds, the egret on the rhino's nose, the hippopotami, all of them, they all got birds flying around them.
Now you said that's for a trained cattle. That fence works.
Yeah.
How does if you're going to do the 2 cow option?
Yeah. How do you train them?
How do you train them, and will electric tape work? Or?
Yeah, absolutely. You train them just like you train anything. You make their very first encounter memorable. So if you're going to have a cow, you've got to have some physical structure, a little corral, something, a board fence, or a true physical structure, okay? Then you just cut off a corner of it or a piece of it with your electric fence and get them and teach them. You touch that, you get zapped. But you have them contained, so if they do break it and go through it, they can't get away, all right? And that's the way we train the pigs. We train cows that way. And you just get them up and running. And after 3 days they haven't broken it, then okay, they know what this is for. Okay.
Do they then help their offspring to know the same thing?
Is the information generationally transferred? That's a great question. I don't know, but I have a sense in our cows that it almost is. These calves